This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Man, oh man, what a hell of a week of NBA news that has just been verbiating throughout the ethos of sports, man. And I mean, while there's supposed to be great things happening, just, this is sports utopia supposed to be, right? Like you have the World Series still playing. It's a hell of a series for people who might not be paying attention to baseball or watching. You're missing out on a great series between the Phillies and the Astros. In the NFL, it's all wild, right? Like teams are just showing up and showing out, and people are, the teams are making money hand over fist. And the NBA is just in its fledgling stages of the season, and already there is just absolute madness happening. When you look at the teams that are at the top, the level of dominant play, the ascension of the rookies that are just like, they're busting through, and we cannot speak to any of it because of all of the off the court craziness that has happened within the last week. And it's just absolutely phenomenal. I'm so fortunate to be able to see if I can make a whole lot of sense of it with my right-hand man's www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw. You're going to have to speak to me, boy. I mean, you're going to have to talk me off of a ledge, because I could not have imagined that a lot of our show today is going to be focused more on what I think we don't want to always put ourselves in those type of spaces, not because we don't want to, but because we do want to kind of build something positive off of the idea that we cover this thing called basketball. But damn if I be, man, how basketball is so poignant and important in the scope of the things that we're going to discuss today.
The Baseline is not meant to be, a negative show. It's meant to be a celebration of the NBA. But sometimes your hand is forced, I think, just by virtue of the news cycle. And we'll obviously fit in some things that are positive to talk about. It's not all bad. And I think you let off of some things that make the NBA still feel like, hey, a place you want to watch or a game that you want to watch. But a lot of negativity, I think this week specifically, a lot stemming from one particular organization in general, which will obviously be on the breakdown segment. But for us, man, the Baseline is meant to be a place where we can just kind of kick it, and our fans and listeners can kind of kick it and rock with us. And, but sometimes you can't turn your head. You have to, point a critical finger, if you will, at what's going on. And hopefully the game itself can get back into a space where we can celebrate it in a more positive light. This has just been a rough week.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea is that we obviously want to make sure that we engage in conversation and dialogue. And I think one of the things that I appreciate about what we typically do, Shaw, is that we don't try to just run with what the storylines tell us, right? I think we try to come from a different space where, yes, that might be a storyline, but there's certain things underneath that layer. There's certain things that are underneath it that I think we need to make sure that we try to open up that level of conversation or unpack, because that's typically what happens when you have many high profile media outlets. They're only going to cover what's on the surface or what deems to be the popular talking point for the week or the day. And I think that's what I appreciate about what we do, is that we try to figure out a means for us to be able to add additional perspective and points to open up more dialogue and hopefully try to lend ourselves to finding a much more firmer understanding about where things are and where we hope things are going to lead themselves to be. Now, we're not saying that we're the end all be all when it comes to this conversation. We want to hope that but what we're hoping is that we're one of those entities that is helping to move the ball forward and not caught up in the glitz and the glamour of, the chatterbox space that needs to happen every single time situations like what we're going to be discussing in our breakdown tend to occur. And that's why I think it's a means for us to be able to help elevate the conversation, elevate our understanding, elevate and educate ourselves even more about what it is that we hope to see moving forward from this league that we appreciate and that has been with us for as long as it's been. It has yielded us with some of the greatest moments that we'll ever see in sports. But at the same time, it's also revealed some of the ugliness that tends to get overlooked and obfuscated when we look at sports, and how if it's not checked, if it's not properly vetted, if it's not properly looked at and looked at by all. Things like this tend to kind of lend itself to the idea that it's, again, sports is just another one of those things that is just easily manipulated for anyone's personal purposes and their agenda. And we don't want that to be the case, because of the fact that sports means a lot to all of us. At times, in the darkest times, sports has been the light, so to speak, for us to look at. So a lot to get into. It's going to be with regards to the situation that is happening right now with the Brooklyn Nets, and that'll be our subject of the breakdown. But as always, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at Game Face Lee, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. Just look for the Baseline, add us on, and then you'll capture this episode and all of our previous episodes. And we obviously encourage you guys to listen in if you're a fan of what we've been dropping so far for this season. As always, you know that we run with the 19 Media Group. 19 Media Group runs the content street. So as always, go to www.19mediagroup.com to catch us and the litany of great shows that are out there that is dropping the illest of content with the greatest of personalities and people doing podcasts here and now. And as always, if you want to catch our episode and the previous episodes, be sure to go to www.thebaselinenba.com. That is the home. Hey, wander through there. You'll catch a lot of great old episodes, and as well too, all the new ones get posted there as well too. So before we get into the breakdown, Shaw, let's run through a couple of some of the news and notes that have been taking place in the association. I know that much has been shown on the idea of all eyes are on Brooklyn, but that does not mean that we still cannot keep our eyes focused on what's going on elsewhere. So a couple of major things that are going down. James Harden for the Philadelphia 76ers. He is out due to a tendon strain. He is going to be gone for a month. As we're recording this podcast, we probably saw a little bit of the Sixers mojo come back, but this obviously where Harden's on the court, Embiid is off the floor. Now, Embiid is expected to come back, but Harden is off the court. How does this play out, man? And, again, it's you feel bad for the Sixers, because it's at times it just seems like they can't get out of their own way for us to really gauge on how good this team is expected or even potentially supposed to be for this upcoming season.
You just feel bad, as you alluded to, but it is an opportunity for Tyrese Maxey to cook. Hopefully Joel Embiid can return and show his MVP form. But the Sixers aren't off to the start that they would have hoped. They're starting to right the ship a little bit better now after being 0-3 to begin the year. Currently, a game under 500 as we record. But the Sixers team, again, they need to build continuity. Harden needs to be a big part of that continuity and that overall growth. In addition to figuring out what that chemistry is alongside Tyrese Maxey, how will they stagger those minutes? So just by not being able to play, that messes up Doc Rivers' plan to some degree. And Embiid has already been in and out of the lineup as well now too. And I think those are the issues more than anything else. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a long-term injury. Harden's going to miss, the entirety of the season or anything like that too, or come back right before playoffs. It's a bump in the road. It's just an unfortunate one. And it puts the Sixers further behind the 8 ball after not having a great start to the season thus far.
Well, I think two things are going to come from this. One, I think it's going to put the focus back on Joel Embiid to step up and to start playing at an MVP level, which I think, Shaw, you had Joel Embiid pegged to be the MVP for this season. So if nothing else, this is a good way for him to really kind of reinsert himself into the early conversation of the MVP race, right? Because nothing sucks more than you make a pick for a guy who's MVP and he has already taken himself out of the equation, or he's not even sniffing the top 5 at some point when you're well within a month or two into the season. So, we often have said that at times when you have MVP caliber players, superstars on a team, they tend to cancel themselves out. James Harden has already been an MVP. And if we're expecting the Sixers to be successful, he's got to play at an elevated level as well, too. So at times we often think, well, you know what? They may cancel themselves out because they're going to need each other to be successful. We're talking about, hey, James Harden is trying to salvage his career, and at the expense of him doing it, he's got to do that with Joel Embiid playing at a high level. So I think with Joel Embiid now coming back and Harden going on the mend, this is Joel Embiid's opportunity to figure this thing out on his own, like he kind of did when, all of this stuff was going on before the trade had happened last year. With that being said, the one person that I really do think has an opportunity to kind of reinsert himself back into the quote unquote human race of basketball is Tobias Harris. My God, right? Like, it's only been a few years that we were talking about, did the Sixers really make a good move in them extending or re-signing Tobias Harris to be a part of this squad? Because when you look at all of the trades that the Sixers have been making in and around Tobias Harris, the one person who I always feel like gets lost in whether or not this is going to be a complete basketball team, whether we've halted on putting together the trifecta of things, is Tobias Harris. So maybe this is a great opportunity for Tobias Harris to, as we say in the Instasphere, reinsert himself into the chat, because this dude disappears all the time. And I think it's really aggravating for the money that the Sixers are paying him to play the role in the position that he plays in. And he has these roller coaster like type tendencies in his game where he'll disappear and then 3 months later suddenly reappear, and then come playoff time disappear again. You just can't have that with the amount of money that Morey and the Sixers have invested and what they're trying to get out of both Embiid and Harden.
I don't disagree. I think I'm just trying to be a different type of analyst nowadays, and I'm trying not to get caught up in how much people get paid and say, oh, because they got X amount of dollars, they have to do X thing. I think part of where Harris is now is the team has changed around him, especially after he got his money. So Harden is into that fold, and Maxey has emerged, I think, as well. And Doc Rivers probably needs Harris to do some certain things now to kind of help the team to be better than they've been. Now, to your point, as somebody goes down, there is the opportunity for old Tobias Harris to kind of resurface. But seeing 13 points a game this year, down from 17, after he was down again from the year before, from 19.6 to 19.5, not major decline there. But we know he's not playing up to his overall capability offensively, but I don't think he's been asked to do as much coming into the season. But this next month will be a great test case to see if he still has some of that in the tank and can carry them through a rough stretch here without James Harden. I didn't look at their strength of schedule, so to speak, but they need him. They definitely need him, and they're going to need him to be a little bit more tapped in offensively, specifically over this next month.
I don't want us to get too much into this, Shaw, because I know how we love to kind of really dig in and engage, and you made some really great salient points. I will say, though, it would be very interesting that we can try to revisit this conversation when it pertains to Tobias Harris and players like Tobias Harris, who over the years you will continually see a downtick in their scoring abilities. But where is it that we're seeing the uptick? And I think that's what lends into us putting them in that, are they real or are they not real? You know what I'm saying? Like, how certain players can average themselves out and you're going to get what you get from them from a scoring perspective. But all of the other things that, to your point, a coach is asking them to start picking up the slack in or taking the load on, they show that is what they've invested themselves in doing. And the team has become better for it. It'll be interesting when we look at guys like Tobias Harris and when they've had to make those sacrifices, if it's been for the betterment of the team or for the betterment of the athlete themselves as well, too. So I want us to put a marker on that, because I would love for us to have a conversation about guys like that and deeming whether or not they really buy into that kind of sacrifice, to your point. All right, let's move our attention to the next bit of notes. It's pretty important here. And this is pertaining to the circumstances, situation regarding Miles Bridges for the Charlotte Hornets. So Miles Bridges has basically pled no contest to the earlier charges of domestic battery, in which during that time frame, he's not been a part of the Charlotte Hornets organization because he's been basically fighting this situation and circumstance. Now, because of this, by him pleading no contest, he is not going to serve jail time. He is going to obviously have to obligate himself to certain measures to meet requirements, for him. And he's supposed to also be on probation. I think it's 3 years probation, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, Shaw. But what do we make of this circumstance or this situation in regards to Miles Bridges. And I think the bigger question is there room or opportunity for him to have a second chance playing or competing in the NBA?
I don't know. It's somebody should probably not should somebody probably will take a chance just on the talent alone. I think it's a matter now of how much time away from the situation, does it need to be before somebody takes said chance? We'll talk about Brooklyn in a little bit and some of the stuff that they're investigating now as a result of, do you think it's been enough time to kind of bring X person back into the fold? Um, they haven't expressly just kind of denied him and saying, hey, they want nothing to do with him. A no contest plea is not exactly a an admission of guilt, but it's just, again, it's exactly that. It's no contest. So you're accepting the sentencing as if you were guilty or as something did happen. So I guess it's about as good as it can be for Mr. Bridges. I don't know how the victim in this case feels about that. And I don't know, in the court of public opinion, if somebody were to take a chance on him now, how that would be received. And I think we have to be very careful about bringing in people, especially when they have a history or have been linked to any type of assault or misconduct, involving, females or any gender in any capacity. And what does that do now for your organization and people who might be within that organization? It's a really, really nuanced and tough conversation to have. If I was a GM, I probably wouldn't be all that excited to be investigating what he has to offer, regardless. But that's my personal opinion, and that's not to ostracize him. And I think you're going to see that a lot throughout the league. People are going to want to say, hey, really, what is this situation? They may hire their own investigators, and Charlotte themselves may decide to bring him back into the fold. So it's very much a wait and see for me. But again, seeing those pictures of the victim, painted a very horrific scene, and those images I haven't forgotten about. And it would be hard, I think, for a lot of general managers and owners, governors, excuse me, to bring something like that, regardless, into their team and organization.
I'm always of the mindset that everybody deserves a second chance if there is contrition and there is humble within your heart about trying to help set things right or put things in a better light. I think the problem that I will have about this is twofold, and then I don't want to get too much into this, but as far as I'm concerned, if you are the NBA, if you have a standard by which you want all players to abide by or stand by, especially if you're a representation of the Shield or whatever the brand that represents the NBA, it has to be consistent. And I think the NBA, regardless of whatever the law indicates, right? The NBA has to make sure that they are properly weighing in to show that there's no favoritism here. It doesn't matter if you are the top player in the NBA getting paid the top money, or you are the player who is the least paid, who is the last person, at the edge of the bench. You know what I'm saying? Sitting next to the water boy or the tower or the water girl or the towel boy, the tower girl, whoever. You know what I'm saying? There needs to be consistency with that. And I think that would send a very clear message to people that the NBA holds these certain things to a high regard. The other thing that I think is just important, and I don't care what it is, whenever situations like this occur, Shaw, we are so quick to try and re-inject the idea about a person needing to come back to play the game of basketball, as if to say this person doesn't need time to figure out their life, right? Like, the game of basketball may be great, maybe a heaven sent type thing, but I honestly think that when you have situations like this that's going on, where you're affecting other people's lives and the well-being of other people, the last thing I think those people, those people's families, and even maybe your own family want to see is you out there playing the game, getting paid, right? And not showing us that whatever has happened, whatever you did, whatever you were involved in, that you are taking the necessary steps to show that you have rehabilitated or revitalized or reimagined us of how we perceived you the last time that we saw you in your circumstance or situation. And it's just interesting to me, Shaw, that we never get ourselves to that point because there's never enough transparency. It's great when it's being flooded all through the media outlets, but when the time comes for rehabilitation, for when it's you have to sit down and actually have the honest conversation with that person to really figure out, did they make amends for the things that they've done or the harm that they've caused or the hurt that they've caused? We don't hear enough of it. And we don't know whether or not that person has taken the necessary steps to show that they're on that path of some level of redemption for doing it.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and especially the point about, is he healed and ready to kind of get back and reintegrate into this? Again, this is a real life situation. This has nothing to do with what goes on in those 94 feet. So that is something that will need to be monitored. The Hornets themselves say they have no further comment at this time. And I think, that's probably the right stance. And Mr. Bridges probably should also have no comment at this time. Take the appropriate time needed to get back into a place, have some contrition, reflect, and then, resume, when the time is right.
And I think more than anything else, Shaw, this is especially the time where you, the player, you need to you don't need PR people. You don't need, anyone else talking for you. If you want people to truly buy into who you are and what you have understood or learned from what has been taking place, it needs to come from your mouth. It needs to come from your heart. You have to be the person to speak to these things, nobody else. We'll get in a little bit about why that is important. But I think that, to me, stands out more than anything with a lot of these athletes. They've got way too many people who are, for their own agenda, is parading and giving words and planting words in the mouths of some of these athletes. And listen, we snuff that stuff out, man. We know when somebody is actually speaking from the heart or where they're basically speaking for as a part of someone else's mouthpiece. And then that makes it disingenuous when you do that type of stuff. And I hope that he's taking that time, his team and his family and everybody else that's around him and he's surrounded by, is taking that time for him to properly understand that if he really wants this to be tried and true, he needs to take the necessary steps, and they have to be from the heart. They have to be meaningful steps and not this half-assed thing that a lot of athletes tend to do, and then they get caught out there when it's not done properly. All right, let's go ahead and focus our attention to Nikola Jokic. I'm sorry. Let's focus. Excuse me. Before we get to Nikola Jokic, because that's a good thing to talk about. There's another situation that has come up, and this is in regards to one of the news and notes that we did about a week ago in regards to Josh Primo, who was released by the San Antonio Spurs due to a situation that was somewhat deemed as mental health issues, but primarily the reason why he was, let go of the team is because of the fact that there was alleged incidents of him exposing himself to other individuals while being a part of the Spurs organization. So we have now found out, Shaw, that the sports psychologist for the organization is suing the Spurs and their leadership for allowing Josh Primo to be still a part of that team after numerous attempts by that sports psychologist to report the incidents occurred, because that sports psychologist was among the people that he apparently had exposed himself to. I don't want to get into the minutia of the legal details and things of that nature. I would encourage people to go to, you can go to CNN, you can go to any of the major, news outlets or sports news outlets that'll give you more information on this. The only thing that I wanted to bring up in regards to this new information that's been brought to light to this, Shaw, is I just want to make sure that I properly acknowledge and walk back the things that I was saying in the beginning from last week about how the Spurs organization, I was giving them kudos for making sure that they were getting out ahead of this and doing what was necessary to give this person whatever it is that he needs for him to get himself in a position to take care of the things that he needs to take care of. If the things are based on what that lawsuit is saying, then what the Spurs have done is exactly what I was hoping that they would not do as a storied organization who knows better in making sure that you handle these things. And I think brings up a bigger point about how transparency needs to be like one of the central most things that have to be really discussed, whether you are a San Antonio Spurs organization, you're a Boston Celtics organization, or any organization that is dealing with player, staff, or anyone within the organization in which these type of things are having a negative impact on the principles that the organizations live by. You cannot sweep these things under the rug. And it's disappointing because we've always held the San Antonio Spurs organization in a proper light. And no matter how you slice this, just the mere fact that someone who has been dealing with the situation comes out and speaks to the fact that whatever the organization is doing or tried to do or has or is trying to do is obviously not enough to what they felt should have been a satisfactory action taken when this was brought to light, which obviously has been for quite some time.
I mean, the main thing is the lack of response based on the young lady's lawsuit, saying that it was brought to light. There was conversation about this exposure happening on multiple occasions, and they just acted too late. And whether or not they did their due diligence to validate those claims in a timely manner is, like I said, it's very relevant to the situation. And it wouldn't seem like an employee, especially knowing at least what we thought we knew about the organization, that employees would be making falsified claims. So, I think they've got to also take some accountability here, and maybe understand that they didn't act in the same manner that would have been appropriate, especially when it comes to the timeliness factor of this, for this person who was wronged. And that's unfortunate, and it's not to say that as an organization, especially you've you've invested this into your quote unquote draft pick, and you don't want things like that to be true. But I don't know that we're in an era in time where you can, for lack of a better phrase, not act quickly, and get to the heart of the situation the very second something like this is brought to your attention. So again, if this young lady and her claims are what they are, and she says she alerted the organization well in advance, and it took however long for this to happen, finally, again, they're at fault, and we'll see where it lands. It's just an unfortunate situation because you want to believe in the good of an organization like San Antonio for what they have shown, at least publicly, to us. I'm not here to condemn them per se, but it looks like they might have got this one wrong.
Yeah, they might have. And I think the thing that I'm more curious about, Shaw, how many people knew? How far up the food chain are we talking about were aware of what was taking place here? And I hope it doesn't go to people who I hold in high regard, but at the same time as well, too, if they are also part of and culpable for what is taking place here, they need to, and we're going to be talking about this throughout the rest of this show, people need to own their ish. Straight up and down. It just, I am so tired. And this is why we want to do other things than have these type of conversations. But it speaks again to how sports at times, really gets away from the sport. Let me say it's sports business, not sports. The game you compete, you by any means, you try to win at all costs. But if you cheat the game will never love you back. And we've seen this tried and true. You know how Rasheed Wallace say, ball don't lie? You know what I'm saying? Everybody thought he was crazy for saying that. But it's just funny how the game in of itself, whatever game you play, you don't play it right, the game will never love you the way that you expected it to love you. And that, to me, is, I think, the realest part of this whole conversation. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, getting into our news and notes. Final news and notes, man. And we need to transition to something positive. Although, when you watch the interview with this individual and you tell him that you have passed a remarkable, gotten through an remarkable achievement, he acted like, eh. So Nikola Jokic, right, passes Wilt Chamberlain with his 79th triple double just the other night. So he's now 6th all time, right? And then when they interviewed him, he was like, yeah, it's nice. It's cool. was like, what? I'm not saying you got to, do backflips or nothing, but, or, do the grit, what is it, the gritty? Do the gritty or nothing. But I mean, damn, Jokic, man, I mean, that's a pretty remarkable achievement. First of all, 80 triple doubles at his position. I mean, damn. So kudos to Jokic, man, for doing the damn thing. But I mean, crack a smile or something.
Nah, it's not his way. He's very low key, 2-time MVP. I've just gotten to thinking, just kind of enjoying the moment and understanding, how good Jokic has been. I was like, well, as a 2-time MVP, is he already a Hall of Famer? A guy who has, all these triple doubles, et cetera, et cetera. He's like, then you have to kind of go and look to see where does he rank on the all-time list in terms of scoring points, rebounds, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I don't know. It's just, but yeah, he hasn't won a championship yet. But it's hard pressed to think that they won't have the opportunity to get.
I definitely think he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I think he's going to probably be the second most important front court player, not from the U.S. since Yao Ming. I think when it's all said and done, he is going. I mean, he's already surpassed in popularity. Zadrunas, right? He's already passed Sabonis, right? So I mean, there's no question by the time his numbers are done. Yeah, I don't like the idea they're going to try to compare. You can't really compare him to him and Dirk Nowitzki because Jokic plays a true center. But I think he's going to wind up being the next best big, not named Yao Ming. And if Yao Ming is obviously going to be in the Hall of Fame, so there's no question. Jokic. This is the question of whether or not he's going to be like unanimous first ballot, or wait. And I don't think he's just.
I mean, yeah, if he continues on this trajectory, I don't think it's the question. I was just trying to figure out, like, all right, if he never played another game today, would he be a Hall of Famer? And I don't know. I guess there's probably some people who say, no, duh, he's a 2-time MVP, but I just don't know where he ranks all time in some of those statistics or whatever the case may be.
I will say his numbers will jump up. His numbers will jump up if he's doing all of this early, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, but again, to your point, he's just low key, gets like, yeah, my teammates, and it doesn't have the same, it doesn't hit the same way as a result of some others. I think would have, if they were told this accomplishment, there's some people who definitely would have been, celebrating, popping bottles, and Jokic was just like, yeah, sure. On to the next game.
Yeah, they could have just asked Jamal Murray and Jokic could, Jamal Murray could have had a Jokic voice and it would have had a little bit more. It's a little bit of a fervor. You know what I mean? You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we're going to focus our attention now on the subject of the breakdown with regards to the Brooklyn Nets. And man, there's a whole lot to unpack there. I know a lot of our listeners were kind of, hey, what are our boys going to say, man? Well, you'll find out where we're coming from when we talk about all that is happening out there in Brooklyn. They say Brooklyn keeps on taking it, but my God, they need to give it back at this point, man. We'll get into that and some more here on the breakdown. Time to break it down to the bone gristle. Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast, and our topic of conversation for the breakdown is involving the Brooklyn Nets. And look, we're not going to get into all of the crazy details that has taken place. I'm sure by now a lot of people have been paying attention to what's been happening with with Joe Tsai, with Sean Marks, with what's happened with Steve Nash, and the Nets parting ways, and now the latest situation with regards to Kyrie Irving and the suspension that he's now serving for his involvement in promoting a movie that touts anti-Semitic ideology and tropes, and really at the whole heart of this is the lack of his lack of willingness to acknowledge that he himself became part of something that, whether he was intending or not intending, we can all sit here and have those conversations and debate about it. The fact of the matter is that he involved himself in something and helped promote something that was false and was defaming to another ethnicity. And at the end of it all, when there was opportunity for him to show contrition. He showed none. And it was only until basically yelling from the rooftops and the threat of him being suspended is when he then chose to actually acknowledge his error, the error in his ways. And so I think the first thing that I think is that I wanted to get your perspective is, what do you make of this with regards to Kyrie Irving, the Brooklyn Nets, and where do we go from here as far as this organization, this team? I feel like, and I hate saying this, man, because as much as I love it, and I've been to the Barclays Center, Shaw, I almost feel like not the fans, but the people who have touched the Nets do not deserve the Nets. This team was better off being back in New Jersey, bro. Like, it's just that's what it feels like. It just nothing good has come from them coming over to Brooklyn, and it's just now this latest incident and stuff, man, is just rearing its ugly head about how just deeply disjointed this organization is and the players that play for it.
I'll say the Kenny Atkinson version of these Nets were a lot more enjoyable,
Oh God, yes.
scrappy and, just doing, achieving above their proverbial means. D'Angelo Russell at the time was almost kind of a feel good story after, having a less than stellar exit from the Lakers organization and coming over there and kind of like revitalizing himself and just, hey, those were better days. Those were the best Brooklyn Nets days, I think, unfortunately, even from, the Pierce KG and Darren Williams and Brook Lopez, all those things, like all that stuff just didn't play itself out. But where we are now is this is just a hollow franchise that doesn't have, the requisite leadership and backbone to kind of live up to the talent that comes out on the floor on a night-to-night basis. Leadership at the top, the coaching change now. Steve Nash has been let go or mutually parted ways, whatever you want to call it. Kyrie just continuing to be
he's the happiest person out of all of them. I bet you he is so relieved.
Yeah, sometimes you do have to cut bait, and Sean Marks he says that Nash told him, like, hey, I just can't reach them. And I think if you have someone as mercurial as Kyrie, that's a hard person to reach. His comments and stuff aside, like I ended up getting into it, or not really getting into it, because I just don't engage in that type of behavior, anymore at all, really, on Twitter. But he has minions who feel like him being suspended is some sort of violation of his like civil rights and, all kinds of names. So somebody told me to eat a D because I commented on, him being suspended. And I was like, this is where we're at. So that's not even constructive conversation that can be had. He's not who his fans are per se, but the fact that the lack of contrition, as you alluded to, and it took basically the league twisting his arm to kind of get to this point. And at this point, that apology is not real. It's, hey, well, they needed me to apologize, so let me do that so I can eventually get back on the floor. This Brooklyn Nets franchise is lost, and there is no saving it, I think, at this point. Talent beside Ben Simmons now is dealing with the knee issue. So, who knows when he'll be back. Joe Harris and Seth Curry still dealing with injuries. Harris is at least playing basketball right now. It's just like every layer, everything you can think about is just effed up. And then to top it all off, rumors are that they're investigating bringing in Ime Udoka to be the head coach. X's and O's aside, yes, fine. But I was listening to another podcast, and I think it was Raja Bell who said they're just like, well, it can't get any worse, so why not?
Right.
From the Udoka standpoint, as a coach, disciplinarian, got guys to listen, will help what is now currently ranked the 30th ranked defense in the NBA. But I think what we're saying earlier in the first set in the news and notes segment is, has there been enough time from what Udoka was accused of, and the Celtics had decided to move him away from their organization to kind of say, you know what, you can come over here with whatever that is, whatever that baggage is. And Brooklyn's decision making, and this hasn't come to pass, so I don't want to vilify them for that, but the fact that it's even in the conversation is indictment enough, I think, to some degree. Like, they just continue to pile and pile on and pile on, and don't really feel like they need to do the right things and the requisite steps to get right. And at this point, again, court of the baseline opinion, it's probably time to blow it up.
Man, some good stuff there. I'm going to try to be real quick about this. Own your ish, own your ish, own your ish. That's all. This is all that is what it's supposed to have come down to. I am so tired of the excuses that this organization has been doling out for not stepping up and stepping in. You know, at the end of the day, Shaw, you know what this is going to come down to? Who really ran this team? The players or the owners, right? Who really ran this organization? Do you really want that to be the question? The question should have been, when will the Brooklyn Nets get to an NBA champion? When they get to an NBA finals? When will the Brooklyn Nets win an NBA finals? That's really what should have been what's been happening over the that was the whole point, right? That was the whole idea of doing all of this. And it amazes me that we're at this stage right now, Shaw, that we question more about the competency, right? And whether or not collectively they all are on the same page about what needs to be achieved. There has not been one person that we have mentioned in the course of, even to what you've been saying, to the course of this, that has led me to think that they have come here with the intent to win a championship for a franchise that hasn't won a championship. Everybody has a personal agenda, but no one has a unified collective agenda. Even Joe Tsai. And I'm not trying to sound, like I'm trying to diss him or anything like that. What I'm saying is, as an owner, even with his best intentions of the people he put in place, a lot of it may not have been motivated about saying that this was the best person for what is happening. He's actually been doing things to put more fires out than with the intent or the idea that he's formulating a championship-laden basketball team. Because if we stopped and we think about this, what Joe Tsai did was no different than what Prokhorov has basically done. And we thought Joe Tsai was a better owner than Prokhorov, right? But nothing that you've been seeing, nothing that has happened, that has transpired since Joe Tsai has been the owner, has led you to believe that he's taken the proper steps as an owner to move this team in a direction where people look at the Brooklyn Nets and say, this team, their priority is really about winning a championship. Because if that was the case, then this would not have been a question of, well, if I bring Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, this, I know we're instantly going to have a championship winning team. That wasn't going to be the case. We all said that. You know what I'm saying? You had to put other things in place in order for that to happen. And it never came to fruition. So, I just wanted to make sure that part of it is clear. As it pertains to Kyrie Irving, and it pertains to the Brooklyn Nets, and even this situation with Ime Udoka, straight up and down, to your point, Shaw, blow it up. This is not good. First of all, if they decide to bring Ime Udoka, I get it. He was a part of the system before he came on to be the head coach for the Boston Celtics. But you know what? And Jason Williams brought this up numerous times, and it surprises me that people don't hone in on this and understand that there's more to it than just a bunch of people sitting here talking about it, as much as you read between the lines about how things are done, how transactions actually happen behind the scenes. Is it not something to think about that the Boston Celtics are basically willing to let Ime Udoka walk for nothing? They don't want nothing in return. If he wants to go and play for the San Antonio Spurs, for the Brooklyn Nets, for the Los Angeles Lakers, no problem. You can have him. A team that just removed themselves from playing in the NBA Finals is not wanting anything back for letting Udoka. Do you know what that tells me, Shaw? That the organization is about the organization first, than one person who can single-handedly bring everything down. They're willing to sacrifice that, and they don't want anything in return. Makes you think about sometimes when you're an organization and you've got a problem person, a problem player, a problem coach, or a problem situation that you're willing to let everything just fall asunder for the grand sake of saving face rather than cutting bait and salvaging what you can for the greater good of whatever should be achieved. I tell you, man, it is ironic how these things become a vicious cycle that lends us to what we're looking at right now. Because if you're the Brooklyn Nets, you should have taken heed to this from the moment all of this stuff started happening about how you just basically need to eat the 40 million, right? Because you're saving yourself a lot of headache now moving forward. But that's just not how these things are playing out.
Yeah, I mean, they felt like they needed to at least give it the good old college try. And, despite all the signs pointing, negatively coming into the season, and I think Sean Marks even said in his press conference after letting Nash go, is like when you have this collection of talent, it's intoxicating. You feel like you have a window. I think they've seen enough and know enough about the type of individual Kyrie is. He's not leadership material, at least not championship leadership material, despite his role as a vice president within the NBA. From all other accounts that I've heard.
Which I think should seriously be reconsidered.
Well, the PA was, I was going to use a very, very crass term, so I'll refrain myself. But the PA didn't even want to hold themselves accountable. They issue a statement that doesn't name him specifically, condemning, anti-Semitic conversations and, any type of endorsement of that, but didn't have the gumption to name him specifically. We all know who you're talking about, bro. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So because he holds office there, I felt like they just didn't want to go down that path. And I think in some ways people are afraid, to really tell Kyrie about himself. And for all accounts, not all accounts, but there are some people out there, he does a lot of good in this world. And he's helped a lot of people in this world.
No one should be knocking him for that. I think that's the reason why, to your point, Shaw, when you mentioned how, someone came out with a vile comment because you weighed in on the situation and stuff. This is not about qualified people speaking on it and non-qualified people not. This is the reason why you want to but there's no proper conversation that could be had. You telling someone to eat a D simply because you don't agree with the perspective that we're coming from, or one individual may be coming from, about what they see within what's happening within Kyrie Irving, right? Because everybody seems to think that because you're saying something about him means that you're placing judgment upon him. No one has placed judgment upon Kyrie Irving, okay? No one is. You are who you are, right? You are who you show yourself to be.
Well, but I think the other part of it too is that I don't believe anybody is any one thing. So
right. You should evolve.
This is a situation. So we're talking about this specific situation. So that doesn't mean, again, all the good that he's done, all the people that he's helped, who we don't see, all the people who's helped, who don't make Instagram moments or goes viral. That doesn't make those things any less. They were amazing things. But in this specific instance and situation, he offended some people and refused to apologize for it.
No, but Shaw, wait. Hold that point real quick before you finish. My issue with him, more than anything, is own the fact that you don't want to apologize, right? Own it. Listen, he
can't because he would have been ostracized from the game based on what Silver and the Nets now then issued out. So he has to issue a fake apology so that he can get back on the court.
But what I'm saying is you're being just as equally fake when you are not owning the fact that you truly believe in this moment in time. Forget the pressure, because Kyrie Irving has proven he's going to do whatever it is that he wants to do. Amidst that, right, the question was asked, if you are hearing from that sect of people that what you said was offensive, and this was your opportunity to enlighten and educate us how you're saying that it wasn't offensive, and you choose not to do it, and then you choose not to want to apologize, then you are who you are. And that's okay. I don't think it's okay in the general scheme of things. I would never want to be rocking with you or sitting down and having some kind of conversation with you or get up and go to church with you. But you are who you are. And that's what that means. And the problem that I have with what everyone else seems to be doing is they take little things about Kyrie Irving and try to elevate him in this level of, oh, you know, he's so much more than that. He's so much greater than that. We're not questioning about the good that he does. We're questioning about the lack of understanding that at the expense of whatever he's seeking in himself, he's doing it belittling other people, belittling other religions, belittling other ethnicities. And if he's not willing to acknowledge it, if he believes that that is the way for him to be enlightened and educated, I just want him to own that. I don't want to read it about from someone else writing about it or him getting on Instagram because I can't tell if it's really him speaking to it or he's got some spokesperson doing it for him. Because again, it's the things that you're doing and the things that you're showing us that tells me more about you than what everyone else is trying to say. So when people are making comments about certain things, I think at times they're misreading where the anger really lies with people in regards to Kyrie Irving. It's got nothing to do with him being a douche to the owners. You know, how many players do we know right now that do the same thing? They've been and we love them and hate them. Probably love them more because they give us reason for us to talk about them. But what we're talking about is at the expense of his level of educating himself and educating others. He is basically saying that it is okay to demean and belittle another ethnicity who he knows nothing about clearly, or else he would have acknowledged it.
Well, for me, you know, it's just one of those situations where it's come to its proverbial head.
And absolutely.
Brooklyn has got to figure out where do they go from here, and I don't think it's let's bring in Udoka.
You know what the worst problem about this is, Shaw, and I don't think that we've even seen this for all of the other teams and the history. We can even add the Los Angeles Clippers with the situation regarding Donald Sterling, because even for as long as Donald Sterling was the owner, it literally took a new commissioner who had some level of cojones, right, to say, listen, y'all can think what you want to think. I'm just letting you know and take a look at what's happening to the NFL. If we do not step in and do something with this one owner for what he's doing, it's going to affect all of you guys and your bottom line. Someone had to come in and say something to those guys to make the owners realize we cannot have Donald Sterling as an owner any longer. But never have I ever remembered, for the times that we try to follow the NBA, have I seen an organization from top to bottom capitulate to the level of ignorance in the way that they're doing things and not realize that it's not going to hurt all of the other teams. It's just hurting them. It's hurting them because even their fan base is turned off by them. You know what I'm saying? No one on no one who watches national television wants to see a row of people with t-shirts saying fight anti-Semitism, and they're wearing it, and they're the ones who are there to support the team that they're there to watch the game for. They're not even there for the game anymore. They're there because they got a player on that team who actually saying things that is anti or is tweeting or pushing things that is coming from a place of anti-Semitism. That's where we are right now, Shaw. Normally, if you just didn't like a player or whatever the case may be, the team is just like, you can just go home, stay home for the next week or so, get your thing together, and then we'll talk about what you want to do coming back, moving forward. But it's never going to be like that anymore. I mean, your point, the gloves are off.
Well, the funny thing about this is, you know, we've obviously had to spend a good portion of this conversation about Kyrie. There's other issues here. There's a lot of other issues here. And, you know, he is at the center of some of the things that have not gone right for Brooklyn for various reasons. But this is a flawed franchise at this stage. And you can only hope that they can now do the requisite work, which seems to be the theme of today's show. Can you do the work now to kind of turn the page and get better? I think, again, I stand by what I've said. You know, I think they do need to kind of part ways with this iteration of the roster and just, again, start anew and figure out. And I know it's not easy, So I can sit here and say those things, but if you're Sean Marks, it's hard to admit defeat in this situation. So you're going to continue to try and mold it and change it and say, okay, maybe now. And if we do this, they're grasping at straws. It reeks of desperation, but that doesn't mean they don't get a Hail Mary and turn this around at some point. I'm skeptical to say the very least. But I understand where Sean Marks is at, where his ownership is at. And they're like, hey, we just got to try maybe one more thing. It's just hard to believe that it will actually come.
You know where this, to your point, you know where this begins? And I hate saying this, but you know where this begins? Sean Marks needs to move Kevin Durant. He needs to move Kevin Durant. And I know people are going to be like, what? No, Kevin Durant's not the problem. I'm not saying Kevin Durant's is the problem. I'm not saying it's Kevin Durant's fault. But I'm going to tell you this right now. If you listen to how Kevin Durant sounded after the announcement was made that Kyrie Irving is being suspended because of what was going on, he didn't hesitate to talk about how it went all bad and that, the organization shouldn't have been weighing in. That basically means your superstar player doesn't have your back, man. Right? So, like, if you're Joe Tsai and you're saying you're siding with your general manager and at the time was your head coach or whatever, and you hear your superstar player yet again saying things that pretty much is demeaning of the organization in and of itself, the organization that is paying you. I don't understand how the organization can idly sit by and no matter what they do, think that it's going to satisfy and appease Kevin Durant. You know what I'm saying? Like, I honestly think if you want to make a bold statement for people to really respect the organization moving forward, then you need to take a hard line. And I mean, that means you want players who want to play for the organization. I don't know how you can do that with the guy who's basically slipping these innuendos and has already made ultimatums. And again, he's let this situation. He didn't even have to say anything about what happened to Kyrie Irving. He could have just said, you really should just talk to the organization and to Kyrie Irving about what has transpired here. I just know that right now this is a tough time for the organization. It could have left it at that. The fact that he injected everything about what's not right with the organization obviously tells me that as a superstar, he should not be your focal point for the organization moving forward. And you still have him under contract.
Well, I don't know. I understand everything you said, and I don't disagree. I think what the reality of the situation is, we know that there's a clear division between team and players all the time. Players are going to stick up for the players before they stick up for the organization because, their players are often seen as tradable commodities and you could be gone at any time. So if KD and Kyrie have the relationship that we all perceive them to have, KD's going to stand by his side, and maybe not backing the things that he said per se, but saying in essence that the organization shouldn't have been involved in that way is more or less just, a homie sticking up for another homie. But it's, again, if you're Brooklyn, I think you look at all those things, look at all the layers, all the pieces of that puzzle, and make a determination of this is the type of organization and the type of players that you want on your team and roster. And talent level be damned. I think you have to have just a deeper look at what's going on there in Brooklyn.
Damn, man. And we can spend all day having this conversation out about everything that's happening. I think I want us to leave some more meat on the bone because I don't think that this is the end of of what's going to take place. It'll be very interesting, Shaw, to see those Shaw over the next couple of weeks, what I think is going to have to take place. And whether or not the organization is really serious about getting themselves right and moving themselves forward.
For sure. It's a long road, man. A long road. What are we 2-3 weeks into the season? So hopefully we won't have something as this exhaustive moving forward. Maybe they do something to turn things around and become more just of a basketball team and not the sideshow and circus that they are right now. I want nothing more than that because I want to be talking about positivity and great things happening, not just in Brooklyn, just in general within the league. But this was a very, very negative week. And, again, hopefully we get back to a little bit of a sense of normal next week.
Absolutely. And listen, we don't shun the idea just because we're sitting here talking back and forth that we don't want to hear where you guys are coming from. So please weigh in, give us your
weigh in appropriately.
Yeah, Respectfully, I think would be the best choice. I don't know what is appropriate for some people, but respectfully. We're not here to chastise or to demean or denounce or demoralize any perspective or position that you stand on, but we do want to hear from you and your perspective. So please get at us at NBA Baseline and let us know what you're thinking. Once again, man, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do.